we're delighted to be joined tonight by a repeat guest. He is a former senator from South Carolina and also a representative from that state, a businessman, and chairman of the Conservative Partnership Institute. They're online at conservativepartnership.org. Jim DeMint is with us tonight. Hi, Jim.
Jim, it's great to be back with you. I really appreciate you having me tonight and giving me a chance to talk about the threat of socialism.
Yeah, that's the name of Jim DeMint's new book, Saving America from Socialism, so we can put him down as unambiguous, I think. It's from Fidelis Books and subtitled How to Stop Progressive Attacks on Freedom. And to say the least, it's high time that what you have to say is said in this country. I would have to ask you, with your experience and all that you have witnessed and done in this country, 5 years ago, if I had described for you the situation in this country today with less than 4 months to go before the election, would you have believed me?
No, I've been warning about the threat of socialism for 10 years, Jim, but what they're talking about now is just so illogical and irrational, and everything is based on lies, things that we know aren't true, and there's so much absurdity. It's just hard for me to believe that even 5% of Americans would fall for this. But clearly, the polls indicate that people can look at someone like a Joe Biden, who may not claim to be a socialist, but he's adopting the policies of Bernie Sanders and AOC, and clearly the whole Democrat Party has gone there. And what I'm trying to do with the book, Saving America, Jim, is help people realize how good we've got it, how blessed we are to be Americans, and what made America so great. And the threat of socialism, I'm just afraid people don't recognize it, and it has resulted in tragedy and death and just poverty all over the world every time it's been tried. So this is a time we just have to sound the warning. But to answer your question, no, I could not have believed exactly where we are today.
No, it is pretty hard to believe. One thing, too, by the way, about moderate Joe Biden, and I've mentioned this on the program before, but it bears repeating because that term moderate, at the very least, would have to be put in a position of relativity. And I can recall there was a poll taken of not a poll per se, but a survey, if you will, of U.S. senators. And as you well know, and many in our audience may know, when senators and, for that matter, House members cast a vote, there are various ratings groups which give them favorable or unfavorable ratings. Liberals likely to get high scores from the Americans for Democratic Action. American Conservative Union gives high scores to conservatives. And they ranked the 100 members of the U.S. Senate. This was in 2007, as I recall. They ranked them on their liberal conservative scores. And I remember the names of the three most liberal members of the U.S. Senate by their voting records. Number 3, the junior senator from Illinois, Barack Obama. Number 2, the independent from Vermont, Bernie Sanders. And number 1 was Mr. Moderate of 2020, Joe Biden of Delaware. And so I think we should keep in mind that although, granted, he has perhaps been a bit reluctant to go off the total deep end of the Green New Deal and stuff like that, but he would not by any stretch of the imagination be considered a moderate.
No, and he is much more to the left now than he was in 2007. And he seems to be a puppet now of the big financiers of the left. And what's coming out of his mouth, I wouldn't recognize. I mean, I served with Joe Biden, and we talked. And that was back during the day where a liberal Democrat and a conservative Republican could actually talk about how we could work things out. But we're a long way from that now.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a comment that he was quoted as making the other day about the police are the enemy, and I was thinking, good heavens, is he buying this whole hog? I mean, you worked with the man, you got to know the man. 100 members is a fairly small club, and I'd have to ask you, do you really think in his heart of hearts he's as wild-eyed as, let's say, a Bernie Sanders?
No, but I'm not sure Joe knows what he believes right now. He's just trying to say what will get him. Right now, he's trying to lock down his base in the Democratic Party. and there are a lot of folks very far to the left that he's trying to win their approval of. So when I hear him talk, I can tell it's not what he believes and not what he even knows, because he can't even follow the script on most of the things he's trying to say now, because it's not in his heart. It's not what he believes, but it's what he's going to do if he's elected, because he's being handled by some folks that are much further to the left.
Yeah. Now, we're going to take some calls here for Jim DeMint at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-50-54626. But I cannot think of much that is more telling about the state of American politics than the warning that was issued early in this election season by an elder statesman to his fellow Democrats about not going just too far off the deep end left wing. And I am talking about a warning issued by Mr. Moderation, Barack Obama. When Barack Obama tells you you're leaning too far left, then I got to tell you, Jim, I think you may be leaning too far left.
I think so. Yeah. And he was about as far left as we've ever had, certainly in the Oval Office. And but again, I can't believe what's going on now, and I just can't believe that people would fall for it. But Jim, if you turn the channel from Fox to CNN or MSNBC, the way they talk about things, I can see how most Americans, or a lot of Americans, could be fooled.
Well, let's not forget, too, one thing that I think that is very key, and that is education. We have, in my view, abdicated control of our educational system for the last couple of generations to people who, in many cases, not all, but in many cases, have a very decided bias. They have tried to turn, and in some cases have very successfully turned, our universities from a center of learning and discussion and debate into centers of propaganda. And if you wonder what's happened to the younger generation, I don't think it's any mystery at all.
No, it's not. And one of my top recommendations in Saving America, Jim, is more education choice. A number of states have adopted education savings accounts. We see that it's helping children, whether they're at risk, minorities, or whoever. And we've got to take our schools back. Our universities are captive now to the certification process of liberals in the federal government. We've got to open that up. Because people who leave college today are very unlikely to understand why America is such a wonderful place to live and work.
1-866-50-JIMBO, our number, as we turn to a call from Eddie in Waterloo, Iowa. And Eddie, there we go. Good evening and welcome to the program.
Hi, Jimbo, long-time listener, long-time caller. I've spoken to you once before. Hey, I'm a younger guy, but I just wanted to throw this kind of quick narrative into both you gentlemen. So we both know, or all of us know, that Kanye has announced his bid, or
that's Kanye West for those who really don't follow the tabloids. But go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yep, Kanye West, and he's not exactly what you would refer to as the typical conservative, but he does have close ties in the past with President Trump. And what I think this is going to do, my personal opinion, is I think that he's going to bring up a whole lot of points that he agrees with our President Donald Trump about, and perhaps even enlighten, if you want to use that word, the people that would vote for him to the, I don't want to say the ways of our President Donald Trump, but maybe some of the mental thought process of, Kanye West is not your typical conservative, but he believes in a lot of what Donald Trump. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're right. I was just going to say that he in fact has shown leanings in that direction. I'll throw in my 2 cents worth before Jim DeMint does. I think, frankly, that he's looking to sell some concert tickets for himself and his wife, Beyonce, and frankly, I think he will succeed. I'm not even sure how many states he will get on the ballot. It's a little late in the season, and if he gets 10,000 votes, I'll be shocked. He's not going to have a major factor. He's not even a Ralph Nader when it comes to being somebody who might tilt the balance, in my view, Jim DeMint.
Well, I'm interested in Kanye because he's shown a lot of courage to support Trump, go to the Oval Office, say things that the left doesn't like and other entertainers don't like. He's got a lot to say, and I'm not sure, as you indicated, that he's going to get into this. I think Eddie said this, to actually pound Trump or to criticize Trump. But I'm sure he has some things to say that a lot of folks in the Democrat Party would be interested in. And hopefully he can help bring it back to the fact that, hey, we don't have much to lose here. Let's try to keep building the prosperity that we had. So I don't want to discount him because he's shown some character and integrity, and he's kind of a new Christian and I guess a new conservative, although I don't know that we can call him that. But I appreciate his willingness to stand up against a lot that's going on today.
Yeah, I'll go along with that much. More to come, 1-866-50-JIMBO. Jim DeMint, our guest, in his new book, Saving America from Socialism, is from Fidelis Books, subtitled How to Stop Progressive Attacks on Freedom. Needless to say, this is not a small book. We'll be back in a moment. Exactly you do at conservativepartnership.org. I guess it's fairly obvious, but maybe not.
No, it's not obvious because there's no organization like us, Jim. I started this organization because after electing and helping to elect a lot of good people to the House and the Senate, I saw that most of them joined the swamp. And that's because once we get them there, there's no support for them. Everything in Washington pushes against them. So what we do is we help conservative members in the House and Senate get better staff. We train their staff. We get conservatives together. We've got a place for them to meet, whether it's the House and the Senate. And we work with a lot of conservative groups to try to get them on the same page. So our job is just to unite the movement and really to serve conservatives in the House and the Senate. And we're doing that now for the Trump administration, helping to find good staff for his second term.
Here's a call from Kelly in Nixa, Missouri. Hello, Kelly.
Hello. You both are doing a great job tonight. I think you're expressing a lot of America's feelings. What I would say to you from a father's point of view of 9 kids, I mean, I have one serving in the Air Force, another going off into the Army. And what I think is missing in reality these days are people actually standing up like a dad or a mom and saying, you know what, we're not going to just give you something for nothing. I think what's happening in America right now, it's pretty much like when your kid comes back and says, hey, I want to move back home. When you look at those things, it just doesn't make sense because they either are not trying hard enough or they're not working hard enough. And I think that's a big factor in all of this. So I think socialism only thrives on the fact of people who are lazy and people who don't want to go out and really work hard for a living. America is built on the backbone of people really working hard and giving their hard earnings to support this government based on a philosophy that someone's going to do their job and we're going to do ours.
Interesting thoughts, and I would wonder, Jim DeMint, how you feel about that. I think that it is entirely possible in the formative years to be brainwashed away from what your natural inclination might be. Your thoughts?
No, Kelly, you make a good point. And it's not just about being lazy. The left now is just trying to make people victims, to feel like folks have taken advantage of them, to give them excuses not to work hard and not to go out and try because they feel like the deck is stacked against them. And the whole point of doing this, and we've seen this with tyrants all over the world throughout history, is to get these people to look to government for their protection, for their income, for their housing. And that's why people fall for this idea of socialism, because they think it's about equality and fairness, when in fact, Jim, I think as you pointed out at the beginning of the show, it really just ends up making a bunch of tyrants rich while everybody else gets poor.
And that's unfortunate, but that is the track record. But again, if you've been brainwashed effectively by professors who are supposed to know all and see all, a lot of people don't understand that. Here's Kim in Shields, Michigan. Good evening.
Good evening, Jim and Jim. I agree with what you said, Jim, about our socialist education system being the big problem. And there's another one, too. Today it was on the Internet that George Soros' Open Society Foundation donated a grant of $750,000 to Detroit to dole out to their estimated 8,000 to 20,000 illegal aliens. And I think he is one of the biggest reasons what putting all his money behind county prosecutors all over the country and open borders. I think he's the biggest problem alongside the education system.
All right. Let me ask you about Soros. We hear a lot about George Soros, and I'm just curious. I know what his inclinations are. I'm wondering, does he put that much money where his mouth is?
Well, that's my understanding, and I know there are groups like ALEC who have actually followed the money, and it's not just Soros. There's a group of very liberal people who fund a number of different shell organizations, whether it be related to the environment and climate change or social justice or almost every area of our life and culture. They are funding leftist causes and leftist ideals, and they've pretty much taken over the university system with a lot of the grants that come through, as well as the media. But there's a lot of money behind it. If you think this Black Lives Matter riots are spontaneous, they're not. They're funded, they're planned, they're ready to go whenever there's any kind of incident that they can use as a catalyst to create disruption. But again, it goes back to this issue of central government and socialism. They try to create crisis and chaos so that people will look to government to take over. And if you follow the coronavirus over the last few months, you realize a little bit what socialism is when they tell you what businesses are essential, which ones aren't, where you can go, who you can meet with, whether you can go to church, whether schools can open. This is just a little taste of what it's like if we vote for Joe Biden and his party this time, because the choice is really that clear.
Mm-hmm. One quick point before we take a break here, and that would be the news of the evening, which is that President Trump has commuted the prison sentence of his political confidant and attorney, Roger Stone. It's not a full pardon, but a commutation, and obviously that's adding some fuel to a few fires out there. Your thoughts?
Well, no, I think he did the right thing. He was set up. I really think that almost anyone who was charged with anything for this Russia hoax should be have their sentence commuted, because it was all done based on bad information. They were trying to bring down Trump and do that by bringing down people around him. So I just hope we can get the people who actually charged Roger Stone and others. So I'm glad he did it, and I'm glad he did it now, because I kind of thought he would wait till after the election to do it, but he spared that man going to prison and giving up his life. So he certainly didn't commit any kind of crime that he was accused of.
All right, more to come with our guest, Jim DeMint, his new book, Saving America from Socialism. Back in a moment. Show as we talk with Jim DeMint, the chairman of the Conservative Partnership Institute, online at conservativepartnership.org. And let's take a call from Sharon, who calls in this evening from Crane, Missouri. And Sharon, it's good to have you on board the program tonight.
Good evening, Jim. And hello, Mr. DeMint.
Hey, Sharon.
I do not think that this is just the old socialist drive to take over this country. The Democrats have gone into an area where they're almost like a pack of hyenas. I have watched and read and listened as they have got people in lockstep, and the minute that they so much as even take a step out of the line, they are turned on by the whole pack. So people are scared because this is a mob, and they are masters of brutality in the most devious and awful way. And I think that if I was a Democrat, I would be extremely scared, because they will turn on each other, and they will turn and eat, as the old saying goes, eat their young. So people who are Democrats really, really need to watch their step because they think that they're being progressive and they're promoting social justice. No, sir. That is not what they are doing at all. And anyone who thinks that is going to wake up someday and find their head in the jaws.
All right, thoughts, Jim DeMint?
Well, Sharon, I think you're really close to what's going on. If you look at the great socialist, communist, Marxist revolution, it starts just like this, with mobs and supposedly acting on behalf of the people and the poor and the minorities. But it's always being instigated by the people who want power, who use this chaos to have power. And like you, I mean, I really think Democrats should wake up. I mean, I think there are a lot of Democrats who are really good people and think clearly. I don't know how they can look at what's going on and want to be a part of this, particularly after we saw 3 years of what Trump was doing with the economy that was spreading prosperity to everyone, while the left was just trying to divide everyone and making them victims. So that's part of the strategy of the left, as I talk about in Saving America from Socialism, is just to divide people and create groups and play one against another, make you feel like a victim or you are oppressed. And this is textbook socialist revolution going on right now in America.
1-866-50-JIMBO, our number, 1-866-505-4626. One of the things that I think has to be added to the mix here, and that is, quite frankly, the number of people out there who just absolutely hate Donald Trump right to the core, and they would vote for Charles Manson if he were still alive and running against Donald Trump. I think that factor can't be overlooked.
Well, Jim, I think you're right on that. I'm just sorry that more people don't know Trump. I know he's presented in the media as very boisterous, but I mean, in person, he's very genuine, probably more genuine than any politician I've ever known. He's more committed to keep his promise. There's nothing racist about him. He just judges things by success or failure, and he says what he's thinking, which is very refreshing in Washington. So I'll defend the guy, but I can understand when I see how he's presented in the media, why so many people don't like him. But I hope people will look past what they like and don't like and just do what's best for themselves in this country. I just can't imagine anyone thinking that Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders and AOC are going to give them a better country.
You don't have to go too far into the book Saving America from Socialism to be reminded of the promise that he made when he took office. Barack Obama said that he intended to fundamentally transform America. Well, I think he had a lot of failures, but on that one, I don't know, maybe he did.
Well, I think he did by just creating division. And you know, I know very early in his administration, he was accusing white cops of racism. If you recall the beer summit he had to have at the White House to apologize for that. He made a lot of issues, racial issues, that weren't, when in fact his election should have put racism behind us in America. When a country comes out and elects a black president, we've made a giant stride. But unfortunately, he left the country very divided, and he continues to play that role in the background now. And I'm sure we'll see him in the forefront down the stretch in this election.
The call for our guest, Jim DeMint from the Conservative Partnership Institute. And we will take a break, and we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to the Jim Bohannon Show. Jim DeMint, our guest, a businessman and the chairman of the Conservative Partnership Institute, spent 14 years representing South Carolina in the House and the Senate. As we go back to the calls, let me just ask you, have you ever thought about running again for public office? I'm sure a lot of people would vote for you.
Well, thank you, Jim. I've just found I can do a lot more good outside of public office, supporting those people who are champions on the inside. And Right now, the senators and congressmen listen more to me than I did when I was there. So I enjoy being a support to them. And as long as I can get something done and feel like I'm making a difference, the conservative partnership is the best job I've ever had.
All right, to Michael in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Hi.
Thank you very much, Jim. Senator DeMint, the three biggest bailouts to socialist bankers in this country were all handed out by men whom you supported, Ronald Reagan, George Bush Jr., and Donald Trump. Who do you look to after Donald Trump, who's going to be your next hero of the multi-trillion-dollar socialist bailouts?
Well, we'll put you down as undecided there, Michael. In the meantime, the indictment that is inherent in that speech is, of course, that Republicans are not so free market at times, and I'm wondering your thoughts about that.
Well, Michael's right. I've been a critic of Republicans, and we are spending way too much money right now. And as part of the president's economic task force, I've advised not to try to get another stimulus bill through Congress because we're printing money like we've never done it before. So we need to look at other ways to stimulate the economy. But as I've told a lot of people, it doesn't make sense to try to resuscitate a patient that you're smothering at the same time. So until this lockdown is off, I don't think we should spend any more money trying to revive the economy.
There is certainly a distinction between trying to jumpstart the market system that you have arbitrarily closed down and just putting things on the gross national credit card as a matter of business. Let's face it, this stimulus has put, maybe $2 or $3 trillion on that $26 trillion national debt. If we had some kind of a balanced budget amendment with teeth in it, or as I prefer, a surplus budget amendment that would commit, except in times of declared war and big economic crises, at least 1% of all federal revenues to the debt, we wouldn't be quite so handy with doing what we do. That debt got that big, not because of an emergency, but because we like to shaft our kids and our grandkids.
Well, I'm afraid you're right, Jim. There's just no institutional pressure when you're in the House and the Senate to try to not spend money, because in order to get things passed, everything is additive. I give the Democrats what they want, you give the Republicans what they want, and the president what they want, and you pass a bill. If you're trying to cut spending, you're nobody's friend in Washington. So we need a constitutional amendment that requires a balanced budget. I'm not sure we'll ever get it unless the states come together and force the federal government to do it, which they have the power to.
Well, I'm hoping that we can. We'll take a break and be back in just a moment. Back to the Jim Bohannon Show. Our guest is Jim DeMint. He chairs the Conservative Partnership Institute. They're online at conservativepartnership.org. He's the author of Saving America from Socialism, How to Stop Progressive Attacks on Freedom. And let's take a call now from Mike in Scarborough, Maine. Mike, good evening. Welcome.
Hi, how are you, Jim?
It's
nice to hear from you. I'm a Democrat, so maybe you folks could get my mind right, or maybe I can get yours right, but I suspect neither will happen here. I remember when Trump said he could shoot someone in Times Square and he wouldn't lose any followers. And to me, that sounded like a guy talking about a cult following. When he said that there was 15 cases of corona and soon it'd be going down to zero, if President Obama said that, people would be outraged, rightly so. And then when he said, I want to slow down testing because the numbers will go down. Well, with that logic, you could decrease the numbers of cancer, diabetes, and heart disease by just simply not testing people for those illnesses. It's just, I just can't understand. It's like you guys have drank the Kool-Aid. I'm just not getting it.
Well, I will say this, and Jim DeMint can speak for himself. I think that Donald Trump's worst enemy at times is Donald Trump. He blurts before he thinks, and he hands people on the left arguments like we just heard. I think that Twitter account of his should be put into a blind trust between the hours of 5 and 8 a.m. But that's just me speaking, Jim DeMint.
Well, I appreciate Mike calling, and I appreciate alternate points of view, but I can tell he's been watching CNN and others. Trump did more to expand testing across the country. He had a whole army of medical people working to get more and more testing. And to Trump's credit, I mean, his premier accomplishment of his first 3 years was the economy, and he was willing to shut that down to save people's lives. Now, he may have said some things that weren't exactly right along the way, but I just watch what he's done, and he's done a lot of the right things. And Jim, the reason he tweets, and a lot of that bothers me too, but he sometimes feels rightly that he's the only one defending what he's doing.
And I have no problem with him tweeting. I have a problem with tweeting before thinking. And I also agree with you. I agree with you that I think that in terms of substance, he's done a lot of good things. I just wish he would think twice before he makes some of the totally off-the-wall comments that he makes. But you're right. In terms of substance, yes, I agree. He has. He just needs somebody else speaking for him, I think, at times besides, well, frankly, himself. Here is Tricia in Ventura, California next. Hello, Tricia. Well, actually, I take that back. Tricia, we're overdue for a break. We'll catch you the minute we get back after these messages. Oh, that was our last break? Okay, in that case, Tricia, you're up. My mistake. Hello, Tricia.
Okay. Hello, Jim, and hello, Senator DeMint. I wanted to ask you, I read a book by a woman named Andate Roy. This is going back to the early 90s, and I'm not sure of the title. It was something about American imperialism. But in that book, there was a sentence that flashed back to my mind with the unrest that's going on in our country. And she had said, the demise of the United States will come from within. And I've just been feeling like with all of this unrest and what's happening and talking about, what you're talking about tonight about the socialism, that it seems like it's actually happening.
Well, certainly we have reached a point of immense divide in this country, and there is a lot that is taking place out there that should not be taking place. Just for example, Jim DeMint, just looking at the issue of statues in public places. I don't agree with much of what is being done, but in terms of how it is done, there is a world of difference between a community through its normal legal processes that decides to take down a statue or what have you, a move with which I may disagree, and a mob illegally vandalizing. And that, to me, is the really big issue, that we are tolerating lawlessness in far too many instances.
Yes, we are. And part of the socialist movement throughout history has been to destroy history and to pervert history and to make people dislike their countries so that they will demand change and something to take over. And Tricia's right. I mean, we see that all around us in ways that we've been warned about for generations, for people who try to explain to us how you lose freedom, and you almost always lose it from within. When people forget what it was that made their country great, and that's what I write about, and they forget what the threats are. I write about that as well, Jim. But the best place to end here is there's a lot of hope here. The last part of this book, Saving America from Socialism, is the plan to save America. And it's not that complicated, but it requires people standing up, speaking out, and taking part in saving our country.
Now, I want to hear that plan after we take a call from Gary in Galloway, New Jersey. Hello, Gary.
Good evening. I have a question for the guest. Well, first of all, I'm so glad that you came out with this book. But so far, are a lot of people buying it?
Well, we just came out this week. So I guess we'll know a little bit more next week, but and I'm just starting to talk about it. But I know the subject of socialism is foremost in a lot of people's minds. So hopefully some people will take the time to read it. This was written as simple as I could so that people like me could understand it. But Americans need to know what makes our country work and what the threats are.
All right, now then, let us indeed look at this book, Saving America from Socialism, the subtitle being How to Stop Progressive Attacks on Freedom. What is the plan, Jim DeMint?
Well, Jim, it begins with all of us individually. I mean, if we just look to government or to Washington to save us or the Republican Party, it isn't going to happen. This is like It's a Wonderful Life, where where Jimmy Stewart finds out that he really did make a big difference that he didn't know about. I guess a lot of your young audience don't know about that, but that's a little story that I begin the chapter with, just to remind people that America is built from the ground up, with millions of people making their own decisions every day about how they live and what they do. And we need to remember that all of us can make a difference. So let's don't just give that over to somebody in government. But understand the major concepts of America is we're a republic. We're not a national government. This idea of a popular vote electing president would be anathema to our founders. We are a republic built on states that have united for mutual defense and other things. But we need to make sure a lot of decisions stay back in the states. Even though we don't like a lot of those decisions that we see now with coronavirus, we can at least compare them with other states who are doing the right thing. So that, and education choice, Jim, it goes back to where we started. We've got to raise every generation of Americans to understand the country, the principles of freedom and free markets and free people, how faith and freedom interact. People have to know these things. Our education system needs to be free so people can choose an education environment that works for their children. And a lot of states are beginning to do that, so we can look at them and see what's working and what's not. But we already know what's working, and I list a lot of the things in the book because you can see them working at the state level. But for the most part, the federal government just needs to get out of the way, stop spending our future away from us, stop growing government at every turn, and move power back to the states and the people.
Are you an optimist?
Yes, I am. Although I am worried because I've never seen it like this before in the 20 years that I've been involved in politics, and I spent my first 25 years in business, didn't pay much attention to politics. But I do see a situation now where if I see on TV is right, that if you've got half of Americans who think they want Joe Biden as president, I am really worried about our country. But I don't think that's true, Jim. The polls do not accurately reflect. They didn't the first time Trump ran, because I think when a pollster calls a house, a lot of people are afraid to say they support Donald Trump.
I think there's certainly a fair amount of people who have been reluctant. And, of course, the poll is always a snapshot of the moment. Let's not forget the double-digit lead that Michael Dukakis had. We all remember the administration of President Dukakis. Jim DeMint, our guest, the book Saving America from Socialism, and this is Westwood One. And I'd like to quote to you some excerpts from that speech. We believe in equal opportunity, equal justice, and equal treatment for citizens of every race, background, religion, and creed. Again, I'll repeat that. We believe in equal opportunity, equal justice, and equal treatment for citizens of every race, background, religion, and creed. There are many people out there who would say, boy, we could use more of that. Let me quote you some more. We embrace tolerance, not prejudice. Every child of every color, born and unborn, is made in the holy image of God. And the speech went on to praise great Americans of color, including Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Jesse Owens, Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald, and Muhammad Ali. And the speech declared that only America could have produced them all. You know where that speech came from? Who said that? Donald Trump at Mount Rushmore back on July the 3rd. Then you read the characterization of the president's speech. The things that have been said. For example, the New York Times said the president delivered an ominous depiction of the recent protests over racial justice and exploited race and cultural flashpoints to stoke fear among his base of white supporters. The Associated Press declared that the president had accused protesters who have pushed for racial justice of engaging in a merciless campaign to wipe out our history. Are they talking about the same speech? Well, yes, they are. Those are the characterizations, and again, we quoted from the speech. I don't know how many of you actually sat through the entire speech. I saw portions of it. But again, here are the remarks. We believe in equal opportunity, equal justice, and equal treatment for citizens of every race, background, religion, and creed. And to go on, we embrace tolerance, not prejudice. Every child of every color, born and unborn, is made in the holy image of God. He went on to praise people of color, including by name Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Jesse Owens, Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald, and Muhammad Ali, declaring that only America could have produced them all. And the speech was characterized as follows by the New York Times. President Trump delivered an ominous depiction of the recent protests over racial justice and exploited race and cultural flashpoints to stoke fear among his base of white supporters. And the Associated Press. The president has accused protesters who have pushed for racial justice of engaging in a merciless campaign to wipe out our history. Apparently, they were talking about the same speech. It's a little hard to fully understand that. But, of course, then you go on to stop and think about the people who are doing the putting down, the people who are attacking the presidents. And you have to realize that the mischaracterization is not out of the ordinary. It's not an anomaly. The president's critics in the media have fallen into an insidious habit of taking his quotes, criticizing those who actually do vandalize and loot and pillage, who burn buildings and tear down statues, and reporting them as criticism of racial justice protesters. The president has more than once said that he is, quote, an ally of all peaceful protesters, unquote. An ally of all peaceful protesters, unquote. We'll talk more about this later on in the program. Right now, let us pause, and we'll be back in just a moment. In this country, and the controls that we place over it, the restrictions, frankly, the adult supervision. I mean, these are our dollars, which are, after all, taken from us, in some cases under duress. If you don't want to pay your taxes, that's really too bad. So theoretically, there should be a great public trust there, and they should be treated accordingly. But the fact that they are not, I guess, is evidenced by the fact that our guest, Adam Andrzejewski, is the CEO and founder of OpenTheBooks.com, one of the largest private databases of government spending in the world. Adam, thanks for being with us.
Well, thank you very much for your interest in our work. It's great to be back on the program.
Thank you. I gather that, in fact, we don't really show that much care and concern for our public spending.
Well, it's constitutional. As you know, it's Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7 in the United States Constitution, which says, right from the founding of the country, that a regular statement and account of the receipts and expenditures of all public money shall be published from time to time. And now it's the internet age. There's a clear interpretation of that clause. It's every dime online in real time. Open the books. And our auditors last year filed 41,000 open records requests on nearly every single substantial public body in this entire country. And so we built the world's largest database of government spending.
It certainly is about time, and I would hope that people take advantage of that website, OpenTheBooks.com. Can't get more simple than that, OpenTheBooks.com. And Adam Andrzejewski Our guest tonight, he's available at our number 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. As was printed on Forbes.com, you wrote an article titled "Why the City of Seattle and Their Police Department is in Trouble." Go ahead and give us your view. I'm sure a lot of people could offer various views on the subject, but why?
So we got interested in the city of Seattle after the George Floyd protesters occupied the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, that Chaz district within Seattle's East Precinct. We noticed the police fled from that precinct, and a new country was born right there on the turf in Seattle. And so we simply wanted to know, with all the demands being placed from all sides on the city officials in Seattle, how they spent taxpayer money last year. What actually happened in the city of Chicago? And so we dug into their pay and pension systems for 2019, and here's what we found. We found tree trimmers lopped off up to $161,000 a year.
Now, wait a minute. Now, for people, it's late at night. For people who aren't paying attention, you said that Seattle City tree trimmers made how much?
$161,000. As a matter of fact, there were 8 of them that made between $120,000 and $160,000 last year.
Wow. And those are your tax dollars there, residents of Seattle. Please continue, Adam.
So they're, the person that heads their chief librarian, earned nearly $200,000, nearly out-earning everybody at the National Archive and the Smithsonian Institute. There's only one pay grade higher on the national basis. There was electricians that earned up to $271,000. Electrical line workers made up to $307,000, and there was a police officer that made up to $414,000. We had never seen some of the salaries being paid out like we saw in Seattle.
How do you earn over $400,000, more than the President of the United States, by being a Seattle police officer? All granted, this hasn't been the best time for them. And yes, I think that in general, police officers are underpaid. That one isn't.
Right. And so you work a lot of overtime, and the union contracts are very lucrative. And so there was some back pay, we assume, paid out from other years that was finally paid out in 2019. And so all told, he made, with all those different buckets of compensation, which go towards spiking off that lifetime pension, he made last year, cleared $414,000. As a matter of fact, in the top 10 most highly compensated officers in the police department in Seattle, it ranged from a low of $304,000 all the way up to $414,000.
Unreal. And surely it must be clear to the people who run the city of Seattle, and I assume that somebody does, even if they are handing over large tracts of public property to anybody who passes by who decides to just take it. But still, I mean, there have to be a few people there who have CPAs, or they know people who have CPAs that say, you're bringing in $100 and you're spending $150. There have to be some adults, some grown-ups in Seattle who can figure out that this is not sustainable.
Well, it used to be that the buck stopped at the top, but that's also a problem in Seattle. The mayor, at $199,000, out-earned 49 of the 50 state governors. She didn't out-earn Governor Gavin Newsom in California. He makes $202,000, but she out-earned every other governor across the entire country. Then we took a look at their city council, and if their city council was a state legislature, they would out-earn the state legislatures in all 50 states. So, look, there's a lack of spending discipline. It starts at the top in the city of Seattle, and it goes down through the city agencies.
Now, I know that you folks at OpenTheBooks.com have been looking at a lot of things, including, of course, some of the spending that we've been doing regarding the pandemic, trying to jumpstart the economy, the $2.2 trillion CARES Act, the $3 trillion HEROES Act. You've been taking a look at a whole bunch of such stories out there, and in general, how well targeted, if we dare make that term, how well targeted has this money been?
Well, it's an excellent question, Jimbo, and thanks for bringing it up. This week, on the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal, we were cited in a board editorial for calling out Kanye West Francis Ford Coppola and Robert Redford, their affiliated companies, for accepting millions of dollars worth of coronavirus Paycheck Protection Program bailout funds. So, for instance, Kanye West, he's worth $1.3 billion, and his sneaker and shoe company received up to $5 million of PPP of a PPP forgivable loan. Robert
Redford
at the Sundance Foundation, Robert Redford, the Sundance Foundation has $55 million of assets, yet they also received up to $5 million of PPP lending. Francis Ford Coppola, he's worth probably $400 million, and he took at least $6 million of PPP funding for his two companies. He's a successful winemaker. In addition to being the director of the best movie probably ever made in Hollywood, and that's The Godfather. But he's a successful winemaker, and for two of his companies, he took at least $6 million.
These were small businesses, are they?
That's right. And look, hardworking middle and working class taxpayers across the country are funding those enterprises from Kanye West, Francis Ford Coppola, and Robert Redford.
All right. Let us simply say that maybe the targeting has not been too precise in some cases. All right. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. We'll take a call from Robert in Charleston, South Carolina. Good evening, Robert.
Good evening, sir. It's nice to speak with you again, Jim, and your guest. And I was just wondering, remember that $1 billion that disappeared when Hillary Clinton was head of the State Department? That money, I believe, was under her administration. I had heard rumors about what could have happened to it. It sounded like maybe some of the money went to certain people so that they would keep their mouths shut, but I don't really know. And I was just wondering if your guest knows what happened to that money, if that finally got accounted for, because I think you – okay, go ahead.
Well, let's let our guest respond.
So we take a look frequently at tranches of federal spending, and that is not something that has crossed our radar. That is not something that we've taken a look at.
All right. 1-866-50-JIMBO, our number, 1-866-505-4626. And I'm wondering other major sources of waste. For example, is the city of Seattle that atypical when it comes to big city spending?
So, look, the reason Washington, D.C. is so corrupt is because it's a reflection of all the municipal units of government across the entire country where we all live. So I always ask citizens across the country, first, get involved on a local basis. For instance, in Washington, D.C., you've got the mayor. She out-earns everybody in Congress except for Nancy Pelosi. You've got the city. You've got the chief of police in Washington, D.C., that out-earns every four-star general in the United States military. That threshold salary is $179,000. You've got their director of parks that out-earns a cabinet-level position, the secretary of the Department of the Interior, and they manage 1 out of every 5 acres of land across the entire country. So the parks director in the city of Washington, D.C. makes more money. The library director out-earns everyone at the National Archive and the Smithsonian. So look, if Washington, D.C. wants to be a state, the District of Columbia, that bill just passed the House. But according to our data, if they adopted a pay scale from the states, they would all take a pay cut.
Wow. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626 is our number. And Adam Andrzejewski, our guest, the CEO and founder of OpenTheBooks.com. I'm wondering how you got started. How'd you get the idea for OpenTheBooks.com and just how this whole thing came to be?
So just very concisely, in 1976 and 1978, my father, as a conservative Democrat, ran against the entire Republican corrupt political machine in Illinois. In a state representative race, he ran against Republican George Ryan. Ryan would eventually become governor and then become one of the Illinois governors that would serve time in prison. So my family knew that corruption on our local hometown turf. And so I got into business became an entrepreneur. I exited that business in 2007 and wanted to dedicate my life to serving the people of Illinois and across the country. We settled on this issue of transparency, and I met a stalwart, a a legend, former U.S. Senator Dr. Tom Coburn, who passed away, unfortunately, in March. We locked arms. He became the honorary chairman of OpenTheBooks.com. We took it national, and that's where we are today.
Let's put it this way: are you getting the ear of any people who could change this, or have you been essentially baying at the moon for all the good it will do? I would have to assume that a few people in public life must listen to you, but obviously not enough to make a major difference.
Well, we've had some good impact. For instance, in February, in the president's budget to Congress, they cited us as the inspiration for the first ever chapter on eliminating wasteful spending. We had a half page in that chapter on an oversight report that our auditors did on use it or lose it spending. That's the year-end spending spree in the agencies where they spend down their budgets this year to get the same or more money from Congress next year. The president, it was $100 billion of spending in September in the last month of the fiscal year. The president wanted to stop it, and he cited our organization by name, bullet pointed our findings, and hyperlinked to our website where the report was at. And then he also linked to another report that we did calling for the elimination of the National Endowment of the Arts based on a study that we did, that entity does not fund the starving artist. They fund well-heeled, rich arts organizations. 70% of their money, Jimbo, goes to an arts organization with over $1 million of assets.
That's something to keep in mind. We'll take a look at, for example, some of the expenditures that are occurring in Washington, D.C., and perks members of Congress give to themselves, other little tidbits that you can learn from the good people at OpenTheBooks.com. We'll be back with more in just a moment. We continue our discussion with Adam Andrzejewski, the CEO and founder of OpenTheBooks.com, a man who looks for some honesty and transparency in the way we spend the money that we take from people for taxes. An organized society has to have them, but for Pete's sake, when you're doing that, you have some obligations to the public, even if it isn't commonly agreed that you do. In fact, you really do. To some more calls here, but first I wanted you to take a look at something you reported recently about the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., and about some of the expenditures that they've had there in that particular little enclave of socialism.
Well, it's perks that members of Congress give to themselves. Jimbo, there's hardly any turnover in the United States Congress, and they make the laws, and so they vote themselves some pretty good benefits. They've got a high salary. First off, it's a rare and exclusive club. Since the founding of the country, there's only been about 10,000 members in the House ever elected. The Senate is a very exclusive club. There's only been about 1,300 U.S. senators elected, and there's been about 550 million Americans since the founding of the country. So it is an exclusive club. It does come with its benefits. The salaries are $174,000 for a regular member, but the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, she makes up to $223,500 a year. Look, we dug into Pelosi's pay, pension, and future perquisites, and we have found that over the course of her 34-year congressional career, she's earned $5.7 million in salary to date. Taxpayers have also put in about $300,000 into a special retirement fund for her. 5% of her salary has been put into that fund. If she invested that, Jimbo, in the S&P 500, that's worth $1 million today. She could take that as a lump sum if she wished when she retired, and she's got a federal pension on top of all of it. She also gets Social Security. So if she retired after the November elections, we peg her pension and annuity package at $154,000 a year for the rest of her life.
Well, of course, she needs the money. She and her husband are virtually destitute.
Yes. I think they're worth $50 to $70 million.
Something like that. Yes, that's correct. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626 for Adam Andrzejewski, the CEO and founder of OpenTheBooks.com. Here's James in Riverside, New York. Hi.
We have a superintendent on Long Island, New York, in Bayshore schools. They get $650,000 a year, and just recently they laid off a whole bunch of teachers in order to give him more money. But what I wanted to ask you about was the 5 Biden children who had no-show jobs. that maybe you could tell us about how they were getting billions of dollars for doing nothing and working in other countries. And it's really just taxpayers' money that they were spending. And Joe Biden, and nobody's talking about it. Could you bring that up?
We can certainly. I don't know that this is specifically what Adam goes after, as egregious as it may well be, Adam.
But that's Peter Schweitzer. He's actually a board advisor to us at OpenTheBooks.com at the Government Accountability Institute, and he's written a book on this, and he's done a deep dive into those connections. And his stuff has made national news, so they're getting some good press on that.
We've had him on the program a couple of times, but go ahead.
Oh, excellent. So the caller did reference New York, and right now there's a state bailout in front of Congress, and Nancy Pelosi's quote-unquote HEROES Act would throw $500 billion to further bail out the states. And so if you do bail out the states from around the country, here's how our money would be spent in the state of New York. We found that in New York City, the plumbers make up to $285,000 a year. Police officers at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey make over $423,000 a year. The Long Island superintendents that the caller referenced, we have them in our data at $547,000 a year. Look, there's a 93-year-old college professor retired on a $561,000 pension. And to top it all off, the New York General Assembly, they just hiked their own pay. They're going to be the most highly compensated state legislature in the country next year with salaries of $130,000. But I've never seen this before. We found 21 current representatives and state senators who are double dipping the system for they're collecting a salary and a pension at the same time for their same position. There's a little scam they're pulling. They're retiring, getting reelected. They pull a pension and a salary while they quote unquote serve the people in the state legislature.
How do you retire and get reelected? If you get reelected, you're not retired, are you?
Well, it's a loophole. Again, they write the laws, and they wrote themselves a great little loophole that 21 of them are taking advantage of. They serve, they qualify, invest in their pension. They take a cycle off, they file and collect their pension, and their pension doesn't go away. They run, they win, they collect their salary on top of their pension.
Wow. It must be nice. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. What else has Adam Andrzejewski found over at OpenTheBooks.com? Oh, my. We are looking at the sausage factory, folks, and we'll come back with more.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for taking my call, and I appreciate you having this guest on. It's so frustrating, and I'm one of the people where this isn't the first time I hear about this, with the topic you're talking about. It's like we become desensitized to this. My opinion that I want to get from you, either one of you, is what does this all come down to? I mean, obviously, we have to start voting these people out for this fraudulent tax spending. I mean, and it's your guess. It's nice to have more transparency on where our money's going, but this has been going on for decades, and it'd be nice if it. And we can't put all this accountability. Trump he's one man. He can only do one thing, or he's just one person. He can only do so much. What can actually be done to vote these people out that are getting away with this fraudulent tax?
All right, let's ask our guest about that. A man who wants some action here, Chris in Akron, Ohio. I know that a lot of these people are pretty firmly entrenched. Nancy Pelosi, we mentioned a moment ago, her last 5 election races for the House, the lowest figure she had in her reelection bids, the lowest was 80%. The others were in the 80s. So, Adam, what do you do?
So you can take away her power by taking away her congressional constituency, and then she's not Speaker of the House anymore. That's one way to do it. Here's another way to do it. This is an election cycle, and we need to raise our voice. Now, it's our opinion, you need to fight on hard facts. We've given you at OpenTheBooks.com an interactive map of the latest issue that's front and center in the country, and that's this Paycheck Protection program, these loans. What we did is we mapped the mega loans, those loans that are over $1 million up to $10 million. We mapped those loans by zip code, and there's 83,000 companies that took a big loan like that, and they reside in nearly every zip code across the country, 13,000 zip codes. So you can come to our website, click a pin, which is a zip code, and scroll down to see who got the mega loans in your zip code. Here's who got it in my zip code: the Ferrari car dealership, the Land Rover car dealership. They got up to $1 million apiece. It's pretty extraordinary when you see the helicopter money that flew out of Congress across the country for quote unquote bailout money on this virus, and it went to a lot of people who actually didn't need a bailout.
Well, it would certainly so seem that they did not need a bailout. Let's talk to David. He is listening to us tonight in Auburn, New York, on the Jim Bohannon Show with Adam Andrzejewski. Hi, David.
Good evening, gentlemen, and it's great to hear you and hear this issue. I tuned into this when I heard about Bell, California, about, I'd say, 10 years ago. And it turned out that the mayor, the city council, the fire chief, the police chief, et cetera, they were all on board. And they finally went to jail. A few of them went to jail. The mayor, I think his name was Tom Rizzo, but I could be wrong. I don't want to smear anybody that's wrong. But this issue has, you mentioned the mayor of Washington, D.C. I don't think that these people are really aware of how bad they really are. They believe that somehow they're virtuous and that they're doing such wonderful deeds and wonderful things that they deserve this. In the town that I live in, it's a small town, but we're under the same kind of a thing. It's not that as egregious as what about, but I think it's everywhere. I think the left has taken over all these municipalities, and everywhere you have a large city, Detroit or Cleveland or wherever, New York, Los Angeles, Bell, California, they're all on board. And how you change that? That is a difficult question. How would you change that? I say the vote is your answer.
Well, the vote would be, except, of course, that so many votes out there are automatic. Adam, have you ever felt that you have, through your work at openthebooks.com, had an impact on voters, that they actually said, hey, we've elected all these people, but gosh, after what openthebooks.com said, maybe we ought to rethink that?
So right from the beginning of our organization, we went live with the pay and pensions in Illinois. And within the first 3 days, we had a massive impact. And eventually, a school treasurer went to jail, went to the penitentiary for 9 years, because we noticed, for taking a look for the first time ever, we noticed his pay went from $164,000 in 1 year to $296,000 the next year. And he was eventually indicted in Cook County, where Chicago is. So you got to follow the money. If people start following the money locally, and we've got the pay and pensions in 41,000 municipalities across the entire country on our website, if people start following the money, then we can hold the political class accountable for tax and spend decisions. So it starts right there where you live, where you know how things get done, where you know the relationships, where you have reputation, and where your word and voice matters.
Here's Tom in Lake of the Ozarks, Missouri. Hello, Tom.
Hi, guys. You were talking earlier, Adam, about some of the top-notch salaries that they're having in the New York City, and I'm curious that Bill de Blasio's wife has seemed to have misplaced $850 million for some effort that, and I was wondering if openthebooks.com had any, knowledge of that.
Boy, don't you hate when that happens? I had $850 million lying around the house just the other day, and I think I threw it out in the trash. Adam?
Right. I mean, these issues come up frequently because there's so much malfeasance across the entire country. This story, we wish we broke this story. We didn't. Other news organizations have covered it and covered it well. Our mission is to take the hard data and break news. So we don't retread the news. So unfortunately, it wasn't our story, although it is a good story and it needs a lot of airtime.
It does indeed need a lot of airtime. So that's probably one that Adam will be looking into, Tom. So hang in there. Mary Ann in Emporia, Kansas. Hi.
Hello. You gave us what Nancy Pelosi was making. What's Mitch McConnell's benefits, and how did his state end up with a aluminum plant from Russia?
No question about the
So I'm
fact
not
that
sure
he
about the
makes
aluminum.
he makes a lot of money as a majority leader. He does not make the same money that Nancy does. I think he makes the same 174 grand that the other members of the Senate make. But go ahead.
So he makes a little more as the Senate leader. He makes $193,400.
Oh, okay.
Okay, he's got an estimated net worth of $22 million. He has served in Congress for 36 years. Over that period, he's actually earned, according to our estimation, $5.5 million in salary.
And he may be the king of pork. Let's be honest about it. He may be the all-time king of pork.
Right. He's actually the guy that whispered in President Trump's ear about a year ago to get him to sign these big budgets that at the time, ahead of the virus, the country was facing $1 trillion year-over-year budget deficit. And he whispered in his ear that no president was never not reelected by spending money. So Leader McConnell also has, we estimate, $1 million in this special retirement fund, 100% funded by taxpayers, that we put 5% of his salary from the beginning. And if that grew at a stock market return, it is worth $1.1 million today. If he retired at age 78 after the November election, he would get about a $96,000 a year pension. On top of that, he'd get $46,000 a year in Social Security.
All right, we'll take a break. We'll come back with more. Adam Andrzejewski, the CEO and founder of OpenTheBooks.com. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. We'll be back in just a moment. Transparency and openness in the expenditures of public money. And it's not just some of the folks we've been talking about. For example, a question posed in a recent OpenTheBooks.com news release: should nonprofit U.S. food bank executives earn nearly $1 million? Well, that's a very good question, Adam.
Well, we just think it's outrageous. I mean, there's real needs out there. At our local food bank in Hinsdale, this was what kicked off this in Illinois, this Hinsdale, Illinois, my hometown. We've got a food bank a couple of blocks from my home, and the line was around the corner. And so I wanted to know how we feed people that are in poverty here in America. So we did a comprehensive study, and while we were engaged in that study, we found that one of the top food banks in the country pays their executives up to $1 million a year. We just thought that was outrageous. We dug into the food banks in the major markets of New York and Chicago, for instance. And in New York, the executive at the food bank makes up to $500,000 a year. And I just think that's morally wrong.
Well, I would have to agree. I'm sure a lot of people would agree. Of course, so when it comes to elected officials, we know that a watershed year, a throw the bums out year, is when we only reelect 90% of the members of Congress. That's like what happened in 2010, the Tea Party year, or 1994, the year of the contract with America. Most of the time, we reelect 95, 96% of them. So I don't know that is particularly encouraging.
Well, it's not encouraging. In Congress, their public approval polling dips as low as 17% approval. That means 83% of the country is on the opposite side of Congress. And one of the reasons why is the lack of transparency in that body. I want to just tick off, the most recent example was that $2.3 trillion coronavirus bailout bill known as the CARES Act. And the Senate was voting on that without a final version ever being seen by a U.S. senator. And that's where we get this PPP program that was rushed out the door with a lot of unintended consequences. It became helicopter money, a honeypot, free money. And the line with the hands out went around the corner.
If you want some good news out there, you can find it occasionally. You write that the president's leaner White House payroll has saved the taxpayers $23 million since he took office.
So there's been a lot of winning at the White House, and the president has performed on his campaign promise to do more with less. He's got 55 fewer staffers at this point versus the Obama administration. Over the course of the first 4 years of his administration, we calculated, adjusted for inflation, he has saved the United States taxpayer by running a leaner payroll, $23 million. And this is why it's important. I have never seen a public official promise to cut their payroll, do more with less, and actually perform on the promise. So I've tracked this in my column at Forbes over the course of the first 4 years, and it's been extraordinary. We estimated in year one that he would save the American taxpayer $22 million, and he exceeded that number. He has saved the American taxpayer $23.5 million, running a leaner payroll.
All right. Stay on the line. We'll speak off air. Again, that's Adam Andrzejewski. Is the CEO and founder of OpenTheBooks.com, a very revealing, literally and figuratively, website. OpenTheBooks.com. And we could use a few more efforts like Adam's out there, believe me. I'm Jim Bohannon, and we come to you, of course, weeknights here at Westwood One. Going against his own Justice Department, President Trump has commuted the sentence of Roger Stone for lying to Congress and witness tampering, and Bob Costantini has this report.
Congressman Adam Schiff, who led the impeachment charge over Ukraine, says in a statement, with this commutation, Trump makes clear that there are two systems of justice in America, one for his criminal friends and one for everyone else. The president delivered a Friday night clemency for Stone, but not the pardon Stone and his friends had wanted. The White House statement rehashes many of the president's grievances about the Russia and Mueller investigations. Stone was convicted of lying about his work as a go-between for the Trump campaign to WikiLeaks in 2016, but he was also found guilty of witness tampering for telling an associate to pull a Frank Pentangeli. That's a reference to a Godfather 2 movie character who suddenly can't testify against his boss at a congressional hearing. Stone and his friends have been publicly lobbying for a Trump pardon, including pleas on Fox News. However, the president commuted the sentence, sparing him the potential of 3 more years in jail. Stone recently has claimed it would be dangerous for him to be in prison, being susceptible to coronavirus. Wearing a mask that says "Free Roger Stone" outside his Florida home, Stone spoke with media, saying he'd just talked with President Trump, who decided Stone should continue the fight to clear his convictions.
He said, "You understand, I have the option, I have the authority to either grant a pardon or commute your sentence." He says, "You should understand that a pardon would be final. You are exceptionally accepting guilt, and I would rather see you fight this out, which is why I'm commuting your sentence."
Stone was set to go to prison Tuesday for the start of a 3-year sentence that the Justice Department argued he should serve. Bob Costantini, Washington.
Now, you have to keep in mind certain things about this. Even accepting the worst plausible gloss on his crime, Stone is a 67-year-old nonviolent first offender. And if this criminal justice reform fad were authentic and not a stratagem of the social justice warriors who have taken Washington useful idiots for a ride, we could agree that the original 7 to 9 year sentence advocated by prosecutors was far too draconian, even if it was a faithful application of the federal sentencing guidelines as written. But no, like criminal justice reform, quote unquote, the Stone prosecution is a lot more politics than law enforcement. It was the last gasp, really, of the Mueller probe. I'm sure we all remember that, at pretending that there might be something to the Russia collusion narrative, notwithstanding that when the "gee, it sure feels like there should be some collusion here" indictment was filed over a year and a half after Special Counsel Robert Mueller was appointed. It had long been manifest that there was no Trump-Russia conspiracy. So the left had a bit of a quandary here. Do they hate Trump more than they love sentencing reform? And we could have predicted that the decision would go with hating Trump and thus fomenting some of the outrage over the Department of Justice's retraction of its original sentencing recommendation of about 9 years imprisonment. And that, of course, was then cut to a far more reasonable range of 4 years or less. To be fair, Trump critics could not have been expected to resist the combination of Department of Justice missteps and Trump Twitter taunts, which marked the Stone sentencing, the combination which has managed to turn Mueller's into media martyrs, I suppose. In a ridiculously overblown and overcharged prosecution, Mueller slammed the ineffable Stone with 7 felony counts of obstructing Congress's Russia investigation. One of these involved tampering with a witness, a left-wing radio host, through whom Stone sought a communications channel with the WikiLeaks honcho Julian Assange. At one point, this host let it be known that he intended to cooperate with investigators, and a rather ballistic Roger Stone, when not uttering references to Watergate and a mafioso character goaded into suicide in The Godfather, warned that this particular talk host should be prepared to die and vowed to steal his pet dog. Not the smartest thing he ever did, but even in context, there seems to be nothing to this but rantings, not actual threats. So, in all, it was not the finest hour for the Department of Justice. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626, and we go to Gil in Manila, the Philippines. Hello, Gil.
Hello, Jim. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
One quick comment about the commutation of Roger's sentence. There was another Roger who got a very famous pardon, and that was drug dealing Roger Clinton, the brother of the former president.
Yeah.
So
that's true. In fact, the power of commutation and pardoning probably overall is something that ought to be examined, but I see nothing untoward about this particular use of it, the rantings of Adam Schiff notwithstanding.
Well, if I could
please
say one other thing, not related. We have a very big celebration coming here in the Philippines next year. It'll be 500 years since Magellan came to the Philippines, the first European to come here, and it's going to be a big deal. It's similar to Columbus Day in 1992, and I was had a big deal for that some years ago, and I plan on doing a big deal for this one for Mr. Magellan.
Well, you're probably not going to be around for the 1,000th anniversary, so you know.
Well, we can always hope, but you're probably right.
Yeah, so that's good. I hadn't realized how time flies when you're having fun, but that's right. Magellan that made the first circumnavigation of the globe. All right, Gil, thank you for sharing that. Let us go to Steve. He listens to us a little closer to home here in Cleveland, Ohio. Good evening, Steve.
Hey, Jimbo. How you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
Hey, you really have you've turned on. I wish you could go to Washington, but then again, you wouldn't want to be Jimmy Stewart or whatever that show was years ago, a movie.
Mr. Smith goes to Washington. Well, I spent decades in Washington, so I've been there.
You don't want to go back there, okay?
Yeah, not really.
Hey, just out of curiosity, when you get to be in your 60s, I mean, the only thing you got after your 60s is you want to get to be in your 70s, and you got all the kids out there. Well, I should say the millennials are all out there protesting, and let's take Christopher Columbus down and let's go throw him in the harbor. I thought it was the whole thing with that was I thought it was funny because hey, let's go rip the statue down and let's go throw it in the harbor. I mean, when you're a kid, it's hilarious. You just completely told the government what you're going to do, and you ain't going to do anything. But Roger Stone being 67. And with the president commuting his sentence, if he pardoned him, he would have to take a guilty plea, or at least he have the guilt in his life, right, on his record. Pardon.
Yeah, I believe. Yeah, a pardon would, I believe. Yeah, that would be final, and you would be accepting guilt. Yes, and that was the point that was being made in this particular case. That there are those who advise Stone not to do so. Frankly, at his age, I think that the commutation of sentence was perfect from his point of view.
I was just looking at 67 years old. He has to go through it all over again, don't he? Trial and the whole bit. I mean, if you got to prove your innocence, you got to go through the whole thing again. Why do you want to go through it if he has to? Why would you want to go through it back then? I know the guilt and everything, but
I haven't read any indication that in fact that he would be retried, so I don't know.
If he had to go to anything like that, I mean, the commuting the sentence and pardoning the sentence is, two different things. So, I mean, I'm not in law, but I mean, when you put something together, You either buy something or you think you're going to buy something, and you're either going to get commuted or you're going to have guilt, but you're going to be pardoned. When you get that old, it's like, what do you have left in you? I mean, if something happens, how much can your body take? You know, if you kill yourself going through all this stuff again, it's not worth it. And it's, you know, you want to live to a ripe old age, not to a ripe old court age, you know. And listening to you is a very educational experience, because you really would take Washington apart, because there's too many morons out there, and they're really getting to the people to where, you know, oh, we'll do this, we'll do that. And it's just what they want to believe and the mindset. And it's not scary. It's too aggravating, but we can't do anything. And just watching people get older is one thing, but they're still there is the other thing. Nothing changes, but listening to you, at least you're making sense out of no sense, and I got to give you a lot of credit for that.
Well, much appreciated, Steve. I thank you very much. 1-866-50-JIMBO, our number, 1-866. Here is John in Burlington, Vermont. Hello, John.
Hello, Jim. Jim, you continue to baffle me.
Well, that's not my intent, but please explain.
Well, you continue to defend the most corrupt, the most ignorant, the most dangerous man to ever occupy the White House.
I have had many things to say, and since you are referring to Donald Trump, I am not pleased with much of what he has said, although most of what he has done, I think, belies that description, frankly.
Right.
Well, in terms of most corrupt, you'd have to go a long way to beat Warren Harding and Ulysses S. Grant, but...
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, okay, I thought you cut me off there.
No.
Absolving Roger Stone of 5 cases of lying to Congress, obstruction of justice, and intimidating a witness, all for protecting the president. This is talk about a pro quo. This is blatant injustice, and you will allow that to happen.
Well, as a matter of fact, you'll find that I have very few powers, actually, in that regard, so I don't, quote, allow it to happen, but I did explain the circumstances. First of all, no one took seriously his discussion regarding that talk show host. Secondly, again, in the era of supposed criminal justice reform, yes, I would still maintain that, in fact, Roger Stone got a lot more than the circumstances demanded, particularly given the utter corruption that surrounded the entire Russia hoax. That if you want to talk about corruption, you can start with Adam Schiff and his pals, and in terms of going down that path. Betty in Butte, Montana. Good evening.
Yes, thanks, Jim. Oh, I listen to you every chance I get, and I was wondering why nobody ever brings up the fact that Nancy Pelosi was a mafia princess.
Well, I must confess, I'm not aware that she was a, quote, mafia princess. I am aware of the fact that her husband is worth a lot of money, but I wasn't aware that he made it in illicit manners.
Her family was involved with the mafia.
Well, her father was the mayor of Baltimore. I don't know that there was ever any proof that, in fact, he was, in fact, mafioso.
Well, it's right on the internet. And
well, that makes it true. I mean, there are a lot of things I would say about Nancy Pelosi, but again, I am not aware that her father was he, for example, ever convicted and sent to prison. I'm not aware of that.
I believe he was.
Well, I can look into that, but in any event, even assuming that is true, I'm curious how that directly affects Nancy Pelosi.
Well, she was involved with it.
Oh, we have proof of that too, really. I mean, this is news to me that she was involved in, quote, mafia connections.
Well, it's on the. I know it sounds strange to say that it was on the internet, but it's
well.
There,
I mean, a lot of things are on the internet. I don't know. There are those who say that. I know that the charge has been made that he had such connections, but I'm not aware that in fact that is a proven circumstance. I know that her father was a congressman for 5 terms, Baltimore mayor for 3 terms. This between 1938 and 1959. he apparently was known to be seen in the company of some of these people, which again is not good. But I don't know that that necessarily completely proves that there have been charges made. I'm not aware of any conviction that was ever made. So again, there are so many things to say bad about Nancy Pelosi that I'm not sure that this one necessarily actually goes to the top of my personal list. Here is Skip in Burlington, Vermont. Good evening, Skip.
Good evening, Jimbo. You know, every election year, they're going to introduce term limits. I listened to your last segment, and I was disgusted with a waste of money. And right now, I believe that the only person I can trust is the President Powell, is the Federal Reserve Board, because he's putting out one warning after another, and nobody's listening.
Warning about what? The chair of the Federal Reserve. I wasn't aware that he has been talking about term limits. And for the record, by the way, term limits are all over the place in local and state government. And of course, the president is term limited. The courts have ruled that you would require a constitutional amendment to term limit members of Congress, and I think that's pretty clear by reading the Constitution that it would require. And so far, no one has. Certainly, you're not going to get members of Congress to start a constitutional amendment term limiting themselves, and no one has to this point called in recent years an Article 5 Constitutional Convention of the States. That's the only way you're going to get congressional term limits.
Yeah, but what I'm saying right now is Powell is giving us warnings about printing money because we're so far in debt.
Well, we are very far in debt. I mean, unquestionably, the last time I checked usdebtclock.org, we were over $26 trillion in debt. I'm not sure what the tipping point is, but we're going to find out. I'll guarantee you that. Yes, we need a balanced budget amendment with teeth. Absolutely. There's no question about that. But we enjoy stealing money from our children and our grandchildren. So, I mean, I don't know that we're going to change. Unfortunately, it's not easy to destroy an economy this big and this strong, but we're trying really hard, and we've been trying hard now for decades. So I think we'll probably find out just what the tipping point is.
I'm afraid you're right. Thank you, Jimbo.
Yes, sir. Appreciate your call and your thoughts. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. We'll start a call from Jackson in Waterloo, Iowa. Hello, Jackson. We might have to finish this past the break, but go ahead.
Hey, Jim, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Jim, now, a couple of comments. First of all, I want to ask you a trivia question first, because I am a Trump supporter. But can you tell me the last time we had the Republicans win for 3 consecutive terms? Can you tell me when that was?
That is the presidency for 3 consecutive terms?
Yeah.
Well, let's see, 1928, 1924, and 1920.
Not since then?
No.
Wow. So then.
Oh, no, wait a minute. I take it back. Of course. I'm sorry. Of course. I missed it. Reagan, and Bush 41. But we'll be back in a moment. Yeah. For the record, if you missed it, this past Tuesday, Ringo Starr turned 80. Paul McCartney turned 78 on June the 18th. Just wanted to make you feel old. We were talking with Jackson in Waterloo, Iowa, and I believe you are still there, Jackson, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes, all right.
Jim,
I was just going back and looking this up here. Actually, the last 3 Republicans in a row, Reagan, and Bush 41 in 80, 84, and 88. The last time you had 3 Democrats in a row, actually you had Roosevelt in a row 4 times, 1932, 36, 40, and 44.
Right. But what I want to say is Donald Trump, I'm going to support him, obviously. I even got to meet him. But the point is he's going to win, let's say. Then after that, if we don't have another Republican win, you know the Democrats are going to get back in. What kind of a world is this going to be? Will they be a different Democrat other than Joe Biden, hopefully?
Well, I'll put it this way. In this coming election, the next president of the United States is going to be named Donald Trump or Joe Biden. What happens in 2024, that's too far in the future to know.
But if we do win again, it would be nice to have three in a row, wouldn't it? But sooner or later, I'm just saying, Jim, we're going to have Democrats get back in.
Well, of course.
We have to
I think that's safe to say.
Yeah. And I just hope it is. I hope the extremeness of it goes away. I mean, we got to find somebody more like a John F. Kennedy.
John F. Kennedy today couldn't win a Democratic presidential nomination. John Kennedy was a deficit hawk who cut taxes to increase revenue. He was something of a foreign policy hawk. John Kennedy, on name, everybody would say, oh, John Kennedy, they love him to pieces, but he was just another Massachusetts senator with a reputation for being a playboy. John Kennedy wouldn't have a prayer by his policies of being nominated for president or anything else in this day and age. He couldn't be elected senator or congressman from Massachusetts because the party has gone much too far to the left. So I'm afraid that's just can't happen, Jackson. Appreciate your thoughts, and we'll see what happens. For the record, by the way, I get considerable emailings from various groups and the like. I can tell you the 2024 presidential race is well underway, and you can name one contender right now, and that's Nikki Haley, the former UN ambassador and South Carolina governor. She is running hard. Certainly, Mike Pence will be running. There are a host of those who will be so running. Here is Paul in Zanesville, Ohio. Hello, Paul.
Hey, good evening, Jimbo. Great show as always.
Thank you.
Hey, I just got to tell you, over the next 4 months or so, I wouldn't want to be in your seat.
Oh, I think it's a great seat to be in. It's like the Super Bowl of politics, but go ahead.
Well, you're a very smart man. I mean, I don't see people calling up and saying that you don't know what you're talking about because you have enlightened me so much, so much. But the thing I want to say is just go Trump. I mean, the man does what he says he's going to do now. He does have a propensity to engage his brain before, excuse me, I got that wrong. Engage your brain, Trump, before putting mouth into gear.
Just stop. Exactly. Please stop and think before you blurt, before you tweet. Tweeting is wonderful, and it's a great thing. Just try to do it a little more carefully. This shoot from the hip mentality. He is often his own worst enemy. I realize I'm yelling at a wall here that he's not going to change, but I wish he would, and it hurts him.
Yeah, well, good luck, and I'll be listening. Trust me.
I appreciate your call. Thanks very much. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626 on the Bohannon Show. Edmund is listening to us in Los Angeles. Hello, Edmund.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Jimbo.
Hi,
I just want to say I appreciate what you're doing. I love your show, first-time caller.
Thank you.
And I just want to comment on the gentleman. Mr. Trump, as president, I think he's doing a wonderful job. He's going to go down in history for spending the most money. And I just think, he's doing a great thing.
Well, I mean, the spending of money, unfortunately, Donald Trump is not that concerned about the federal deficit. The main source of bipartisan agreement inside the Beltway right now is that both the Democrats and President Trump and many congressional Republicans all agree that increasing the national debt is not that big a deal. I am among those who would disagree with all of them, but on many areas, I think the president's doing a fine job.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Me being as an islander, I'm from the Virgin Islands, and but hey. Also, I have a book I just released. It's called The Journey of the Island Jewel, and if you get a chance, check it out.
We will have to do that. I will tell you, I have been to the Virgin Islands, and It is a truly lovely place, and I urge all of you out there when we reach the point where we are again going forth and traveling a great deal. The Virgin Islands is a beautiful place. I'll tell you a quick story about my radio station there, WVWI, AM 1000. They're right on the beach, and it is a radio station unlike any you will ever see. Yes, they get hurricanes there. They lost that station one time. And they have a tower. You go by radio towers, and if you get close enough, you can see they have these guide wires that hold them in place. That thing must have 4 dozen guide wires. It looks like a Christmas tree. There's this cone of guide wires that holds their tower in place. The building is poured concrete with reinforcement, with rebar, not cinder blocks, poured concrete, no windows, one door, a steel door that faces away from the beach. That place is a fortress. A tank would have trouble shooting its way into that station. But anyway, fine affiliate, and I greatly appreciate them. All righty, let's take a break. We'll listen to our good friend Mighty John Marshall of MoneyMusic.com.
The 12-inch single can sell for $300 today. Find the value for all your records at MoneyMusic.com.
Yeah, we're going to have Mighty John back on, by the way, in the near future, because we deserve a break from all the troubles of the day, and John provides a great way to do it. Okay, to Dana in Asheville, New York. Good evening.
Hello, Jimbo. Nice
Hi.
to speak with you again. I spoke
Yes,
to you
sir.
one other time. I'm going to be real brief on this because I'm not a radio person. But just 2 things I wanted to mention here about Mr. Trump and why he may be leery on letting his taxes revealed. I know he's saying he's being audited, but I'm just thinking he's got some type of a foreign investment that may be incriminating to him. And for whatever reason, I think possibly Saudi Arabia. I know that sounds kind of far out, but
No, it doesn't sound far out.
those are just my thoughts there. I heard what you said yesterday about him, his ego or something. He's not as rich as he may not.
I
be
think
as rich.
that would be probably what we would find, that it is ego, and that he would be very embarrassed that he doesn't have as many billions as he would like people to have. I mean, that's pretty childish, but that wouldn't be out of place with this president. As I've said before on the subject, I am of 2 minds about this. As a matter of general principle, yes, I believe that public officials and candidates for public office should be required to reveal certain things about their finances. It is the job of voters to judge, and this is a handy tool for judging. However, it is not currently the law at the federal level. And the second thing I have to say is that, yes, these current efforts involving Donald Trump are pretty much just another excuse to try and get him. And so the motivation behind this I find reprehensible, and I don't agree with it at all. But as a general principle, yes, people running for public office should tell us about their finances, and I don't know what we'll discover. But again, I think he's created a problem here he doesn't need to, and I think it's just plain ego that is involved here. That's my own personal take, Dana, and I thank you for your thoughts tonight. Let's talk to Steve in Angier, North Carolina. Hello, Steve.
Hey, Mr. Jimbo.
There we go. I'm sorry. I flat out forgot to. I did not get you on there, so please continue, and thank you, Steve. Go ahead.
Okay. Am I on?
Yes, you're on. I'm sorry.
You
weren't for a moment, but you are now. Go ahead.
Hey, well, I got to start off by one phone call. I was feeling pretty good this week till that one phone call a while ago talking about Roger Stone. You know, that once you get in your 60s, all you have to look for is making it into your 70s.
That was rather funny, yes, I must confess.
And all the good feelings I had about I'd actually convinced myself that 60s was today's 40s, but that blew that out.
Well, yeah, seriously, yeah, because your number one goal in life in your 40s is not to make your 50s. So yeah, I guess there you go.
And I think you got me by 3 or 4 years. So anyway.
Let me put it this way. I remember the 40s, okay? But go ahead.
I'll be 61 61 in a little while here.
There you go.
But I'm a young 61.
Of course.
My mind's still fresh.
Yeah.
Unlike what I was going to call in last night. I keep hearing tonight is a little trash Trump night, and I keep hearing some things about, if you want to hear, you mentioned a few hours ago about the Mount Rushmore speech.
Yeah.
Good. Look that up, Jimbo, and listen to all of it, because I think to date, that might be the best speech he's ever given.
I think you could argue that it absolutely is. It's one of the best speeches any president has ever given. Yes.
And I think it's one of those speeches that speaks to the time that it was given, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yes. And will be looked back upon depending on what happens. Now, President Trump's tweets, yep, I agree with you, but he's not going to change. That's his style.
Mm-hmm.
He's going. He knows something that not many Republicans know. There used to be a different Democratic Party. It used to be a Democratic Party that you could sit down and negotiate with. Those days are over. There are no compromises. There's no middle ground. The left has gone so far left that there's no issues to agree with them on. So what he does is keep them so disturbed that in the last 3.5 years, 4 years almost, the Democrat Party has exposed themselves to everyone of what they truly, truly believe.
Or what many of them have come to believe. I think that earlier party, you had Democrats who were not nearly this far left. They've come to believe it, and there are those in their ranks who don't. I really believe, but they're scared to death to speak up.
Can I say one more thing?
Please, yes, please, yes.
I couldn't get in last night, and y'all was talking about Biden. And you think President Trump's tweets are a little out there. Wait till if we get a President Biden. He said I think it was Monday or Tuesday, he said that he introduced himself as Joe Biden's husband. And I know, in being honest, that he probably was going to be kind of cute and say, hello, I'm Jill Biden's husband. But he did say, I'm Joe Biden's husband. But then I had to say, we're living in such a crazy world, Jimbo.
Yeah.
I had to second guess myself. And maybe I said, well, maybe that's a thing now.
Maybe he has married himself. It's always possible. I'm sure he loves himself enough.
Alphabet.
Yeah.
There might be another alphabet added there.
Yeah.
That you can be your own husband.
You never know. We're living in a strange time, Steve. We'll be back in just a moment. Are you thinking about a trip this summer? How about driving roughly 1 mile to the base of a 3-mile tall mountain? That's the summer vacation plan for the Mars rover Curiosity, which has been exploring Mount Sharp for the past 6 years, including the surrounding Gale crater, which shows signs of once having been covered with water. NASA's InSight lander includes a French seismometer, which is so sensitive that it picks up sounds of Martian wind and also the occasional Mars quake. Call me when it picks up the sound of someone jacking up the lander to remove its wheels. As for the Venus rover about to be sent by NASA, it's named AIRI, an acronym for Automation Rover for Extreme Environments. That's no joke. On a planet with temperatures up to 900 degrees Fahrenheit and a crushing sulfuric acid-laden atmosphere, the longest a probe has ever transmitted from Venus is by a 1981 Soviet probe of not quite 2 whole hours. They've even got a contest that they've held on how to make a rover rove, where electronics get fried or eaten up. The winner suggested using a wind turbine. Venus has pretty fair winds, which would wind up a spring, much like an old wind-up wristwatch. NASA has another contest underway called the Lunar Loo Challenge, and you have until August 17th to submit your solution to the website herox.com/Lunar Loo. That's HEROX.com/Lunar Loo, LOO. As for what NASA wants, well, we currently have zero-gravity toilets. That's usually some sort of vacuum system. And, of course, we have toilets which work at 1G, your garden variety home bathroom. What NASA wants is a toilet which will work in the 1/6 gravity of the moon and work for people 4'10" to 6'5" and weighing 107 up to 290 pounds. Oh, and also works for both men and women. What, you say? We've already been there several times. What did Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin do? The answer, my friend, is they wore diapers. The Offbeat. I'm Jim Bohannon. Friday was an up day on Wall Street. Here's the Marketplace Minute.
I'm Mitchell Hartman with the Marketplace Minute. An up day on Wall Street. The Dow rose 1.4%, the S&P 500 gained 1%, and the Nasdaq pushed up 0.6%. Investors drove stocks higher on the week while shrugging off a nationwide surge in coronavirus. The U.S. hit a new record for daily cases at just over 62,000. Several states rolled back reopening and imposed new mask and social distancing rules. We're seeing deflation at the wholesale level in the U.S. The producer price index for June was down 0.2% month to month, 0.8% year to year. That's a sign of weak consumer demand in the economy. And Amazon is requiring its employees to delete TikTok from mobile devices that access the company's network due to unspecified security concerns about the Chinese-owned app. I'm Mitchell Hartman with the Marketplace Minute.
And time for a quick call from Gene in Pittsburgh. Hi.
Hey, Jimbo. I think we all agree that Biden's running mate's essentially going to be portrayed like a mixture of the new Messiah and Santa Claus by the Democrats, right?
Yeah.
So you got Biden campaigning for president. His running mate's going to be campaigning for president. Trump's campaigning for president, but where's Pence?
Well, he'll be campaigning for vice president. And of course, we do have the one vice presidential debate that is coming up this year. And of course, Biden's running mate will have to wait at least one term before running for the big office. Our producer and webmaster, that's Kathy Johnson. We're at JimBohannonShow.com. Adrian Danhauser handles our engineering for a Friday night. I'm Jim Bohannon.